Hello and welcome to the Manchester is Red podcast. My name is Steven Railston. We're recording this episode on a Monday morning after Manchester United defeated Brentford 2-1 at Old Trafford thanks to a late, very dramatic Scott McTominay brace. Who would have thought? Not many people, I would say. And Tyrone Marshall was at the game at Old Trafford in the press box as usual. A pretty dismal performance, it's fair to say. Brentford looked on course to win a pretty deserved 1-0 victory. Scott McTominay comes on, 87th minute, 2 goals. How has that happened?
I have no idea, to be honest. Absolutely no idea. It was, it was a stressful afternoon given the rewrites that were required there. Not just from a unacceptable defeat to unacceptable draw, but somehow a heroic win. So yeah, it was an immensely confusing game. I mean, the stuff I'd written for the final whistle was generally on how poor they were, especially second half. I think I used the term that they were a broken team in the second half, and McTominay came on and stitched them back together, basically. I'm not sure how. A lot of talk now of it being a turning point. We'll come on to that. You've got to do more to make it a turning point than just say it and hope it. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know how it happened. Like I say, I thought they were poor. I thought they started okay again, to be fair. They didn't create loads, but it did feel like they were controlling the game until they went behind and playing the game in Brentford's half, not creating a lot of chances. And then, the goal is just absolutely lamentable. Some of the goals they conceded, I talked about the 3 against Galatasaray and especially the one from the throw on Tuesday night. This was just a catalogue of errors. Casemiro giving the ball away, Lindelof's clearance straight back into the danger zone, and then Onana basically jumping over the ball again. It was a disaster. And then, like I say, second half, I never really thought they looked like getting back into the game. It didn't feel like they were going to turn it around. And the only jeopardy was that Brentford were only winning 1-0 and had stopped really offering a threat. They weren't offering that much of a threat, and at that point, there's always the potential for something to happen and change the game. And in this job, what's easiest in this job is that it's done and dusted at half time or with 20 minutes to go. And
the Crystal Palace in the League Cup.
Crystal Palace in the League Cup, something like that. 3-0 at half time, 3-0 after an hour. You know what's going to happen. There's no chance of a comeback. Here, there was always that little possibility of a comeback, and it did just completely change everything. And I think I said to Samuel with about 10 minutes to go, they could have done with killing them off here, because it was, everyone had written inquest pieces, what on earth going wrong pieces, and would rip it up and start again when United score. And it's adrenaline for us when it happens and thrilling. And it was an amazing comeback. I mean, the noise when McTominay's second goal went in was unbelievable. I don't think I've ever heard Old Trafford that loud, to be honest. It wasn't just your normal celebration noise. It was like a guttural roar, basically, like a relief mixed with celebration and frustration coming out. It was a remarkable noise that lasted for a long time, and celebrations were pretty incredible. But yeah, I think a lot of us were left scratching our heads at how exactly they had got away with it.
I think they still are. I mean, the goals themselves, McTominay takes that ball down. Dare I say, almost Zlatan Ibrahimovic-esque. Yeah. The way took the ball down.
I mean, they scored just before that as well.
Yeah.
The offside there.
Yeah, that's true as well.
I actually forgot about it until yesterday.
Yeah, and then we've got to praise Harry Maguire for the second goal. He wins that header from the free kick. McTominay puts the back of the net. He kind of talked about how proud he was to represent Manchester United after the game, what it means to represent the club, which was some nice quotes coming out. But we've just talked about Maguire and McTominay there. Those 2 players were going to leave the club in the summer. West Ham had launched a bid. It was considered. It was obviously rejected in the end. In another world, this result mightn't have happened.
100%, yeah. I mean, my rewrite consisted of an intro that had this summer gone differently, Maguire and McTominay would have been seeded up for West Ham United rather than Manchester United.
It was a very West Ham goal as well, wasn't it?
It was a very West Ham goal, actually, yeah. West Ham had a bid accepted for Maguire, and the move didn't happen. I think it could have happened again at the end of the window, but for the defensive injuries that United had at that time. McTominay, we know West Ham were interested. Never got as far as a bid being accepted, but had Amrabat come in earlier, or had Kobe Mainoo not got injured in that Real Madrid game in Houston, I think he could have gone as well. And essentially, Ten Hag, my piece was Ten Hag has been bought breathing time by 2 players he was open to selling. And, it kind of sums up where United are at the moment and what's going on with United, that it is 2 players who essentially are outcasts. They're only getting in the team because there's so many injuries at the moment and things are getting desperate. So, they got a little fortune there because they could have easily left the club. I think there's probably an expectation both will leave the club next summer. So, it just shows the narrative sometimes that those 2 players have have combined to rescue it. And kind of, a bit cheesy, but fitting in a way that on a day when, there was wearing black armbands for Sir Alex Ferguson's wife, Lady Cathy Ferguson, not just that they score twice after the 90th minute, kind of the ultimate Fergie tribute, but that it's got McTominay as well. And, I said in my piece that McTominay is, I was against selling him all summer. I think he's
effective, isn't he?
He's effective, and he's the type of player that every Fergie title-winning team, Fergie would always have found room for Scott McTominay, and he might only start 15 to 20 games a season, but it'd have started him at left back recently with the injuries. It could start him at centre half or at right back, anywhere in midfield. He's the kind of, the academy graduate that knows what it means to represent the club. He knows the culture of the club. He's reliable. He's not going to complain. He'll give you consistency of 6, 7 out of 10 maybe for 20 games a season in a variety of positions. I just think all of Fergie's title winning teams had those sort of players there, and I think I don't think he's someone that should necessarily leave the club. They bought Amrabat in now, which adds to the competition. I'd be intrigued to see whether Sofiane Amrabat is actually that much better than Scott McTominay over the next 8 months or so.
It's also possible that he's actually played in the wrong position over the last few years. He was tend to be used as number 6, as a deep lying midfielder, and Solskjaer that dreaded double pivot with Fred, obviously McFred, very famous. But we see him for Scotland, and he kind of plays as an advanced number 8. We've talked about this podcast where he arrives in the box late, almost like Frank Lampard used to, and he's really effective in that role. And you see him time and time again coming on for United in a more advanced position. And like I say, he's effective when he comes and he makes those runs, and he can get goals. He's got goals in his game, doesn't he?
Yeah, 100%. He's got goals in his game. I mean, I think he's one of the top scorers in European qualifying at the moment, and he's quite hard to pigeonhole as a player because he's played centre back for Scotland.
I mean, you think he could play for number 8 for a lower Premier League club, couldn't you? That's the thing, like an Everton maybe, or someone like that.
Yeah. And he could do it for United in League Cup games and lower Premier League games if you need to rest players or if you've got injuries like at the moment. But like I say, he's played centre half for Scotland previously. He's playing attacking midfield for Scotland now. He was a striker coming through a United's academy until fairly late on. He's played this pivot role. I don't think he's someone that you would use kind of in Casemiro's role now, where there's just one. That McFred partnership, kind of together, they were a decent pivot, but obviously you had to use them together. One of them on their own didn't do the job. And this just shows why you should keep him, I think, because mentioned there, basically every position of the pitch that he could play. He can play centre half, certainly in a 3, probably in a 2 occasionally if it was required. He's played up front. You can throw him on late in games to, be an agent of chaos, basically, get in the box. And he is kind of unpredictable in that way. And he always thrived against Leeds when it was Solskjaer against Bielsa, so he seemed to enjoy those games. And there he played those advanced roles. Because like you say, those runs, when Leeds were a total marking team. Yeah. And McTominay had the legs and the energy to basically run past his marker. And that's what made him such a threat in those games. So yeah, I think, there's roles he can play, and that versatility, especially from an academy graduate, is to be prized, I think. And I know United have been desperate to raise money, but I still think there's got to be a space for him in that squad.
It was a really, really important result in the end. So fair play to McTominay. They had obviously him to thank really for the victory, especially after defeats against Crystal Palace and Galatasaray. That performance in midweek 3-2 against Galatasaray was so poor, really terrible. And especially before the international break, they had to win this game. And for 90 minutes, for 90 minutes, it looked like they were heading to a defeat, another defeat, third consecutive home defeat. It would have been the 7th defeat in 11 games this season, which is just unbelievable. So is this papering over the cracks, Tyrone? Or you've talked about, is it the moment where they kick on and go, right, okay, this is where our season starts, we can progress from here, we'll use this? Because for me, at the moment, it has felt in the last few weeks that it has been papering over the cracks a bit. And I'm starting to actually question the style of play. I know there's been a lot of injuries, and we've talked about there have been caveats. Marcus Rashford, top goal scorer, he's misfiring. That's obviously going to have a huge impact on the team. But I'm watching this side at the moment, I'm thinking, what are they trying to do? We're seeing them have a lot of the ball. There's not much penetration in the final third, and they don't have that cutting edge around the opposition's box.
No, they don't. They've lost their identity from last season. Very clearly lost their identity, I think. And I mean, it's papered over the cracks at the moment. Maybe it becomes a turning point. We shall see. But as a whole, the performance wasn't good enough. And as I said, I thought the second half was, that was really alarming. That second half, the number of times players would be on the ball and just kind of shrug at teammates and wonder where the movement was, and the pace of the move, the pace of the players' movement was slow, the pace of the ball movement was slow, it was predictable, and it was just really, really flat second half for a game they were chasing against pretty mediocre opposition. I mean, I didn't think Brentford were particularly impressive at all. They've won once all season still. That's the type of team that any top four side should be putting away very easily at home, and United made such heavy weather of it. We're lucky to get the win, I think, in the end. I mean, only time will tell whether it's papering over the cracks. It certainly changes the mood. The difference in that 10 minutes McTominay was
It's so crucial, isn't it, for the mood? Especially
for the
international break.
It's unbelievable. The players leave for internationals with a spring in their step. Like I say, I mentioned the noise for the celebration, for the gold celebration, the noise and celebrations at full time. Players almost doing a lap of honour. Ten Hag sort of almost dance of joy in his technical area.
Relief. Dance of relief.
Yeah. 10 players in front of the Resurgence standing McTominay celebrating, and Dalot was on his hands and knees in the penalty area, almost giving thanks that they somehow got away with it. And it does change the mood. And we spoke to Dalot after the game rather than McTominay, unfortunately. It would have been nice to speak to McTominay, but we got Dalot. And in his first answer, he said, this is a turning point. But, just saying it's a turning point doesn't work. It's not. It's a result that could be a turning point. It's not a performance that can be a turning point, because the performance wasn't there. And we've kind of had this before, there was a United staff member pre-match was saying that if they can win this and beat Sheffield United, then it can be a turning point. Well, can it? Because the turning point was at Burnley. When they won at Burnley recently, they followed up by beating Palace. That was the turning point. Then they lost to Crystal Palace at home and Galatasaray at home. So,
I think the key is, even when they've been winning, the performances haven't been convincing.
Haven't been there.
Look at the Nottingham Forest game, fair enough, you came back from 2 goals down. But it wasn't a convincing win. This wasn't a convincing win.
No. I mean, the only good performance all season was against Crystal Palace in the Carabao Cup, when Palace basically rope-a-doped them to win the game that counts on the Saturday. They've not, like I said, they've not played well all season. Wolves unconvincing, Forest unconvincing. Burnley, they dug in. They showed some positive traits that game. It wasn't a classy performance, but it was a gutsy performance. But other than that, they've not played particularly well. And there's just, like you said, there's a lot of areas of concern. I'm with you stylistically. I've said this a few times. Like Ten Hag, I think, tried to move it on and make them more attacking this year, and it's just not working. It's making them more open. We can't entirely overlook the injuries. It's obviously a major issue in terms of the players they're missing. But just as alarming is players that have dropped off. Rashford, for one.
And go on, say his name.
Well, I was just going to say, if for people watching on video, they can see over your shoulder, Casemiro, the hero for the Carabao Cup.
That's who I was going to come on, because that was a key moment.
He has been shocking this season.
He really has.
That
was a key moment in the game. Substituted at half-time. You talked about giving the ball away for the goal. Don't know what he was doing. He tries to recover from a tackle, doesn't win it back. Obviously, Brentford go and score. We talked probably around 3 weeks ago, I can't remember what game it was, but me and you sat in the studio and we said, look, there's a growing conversation now around Casemiro. We're going to have it, that he has underperformed this season. He's not the same player as he was last year. And that performance, it was really alarming, wasn't it? Again, it highlighted how poor he's been. And Ten Hag agreed, he took him off, replaced him with Christian Eriksen. And I think, what did he say after the game? I wanted a bit more football. And that's concerning as well if you're Casemiro.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it was a pretty brutal decision from Ten Hag to take him off. We've seen him use half-time substitutions a lot since he became United manager, but taking a player of Casemiro standing off at half-time.
It's a statement, wasn't it?
It's a statement, undoubtedly. And he has, like I say, I think he's been poor all season. Teams attacking midfielders are getting joy against United. Odegaard, Maddison, Jamal Musiala, Kerem Aktürkoğlu, I think his name was, for Galatasaray, who was excellent. But they're giving Casemiro the runaround because they're finding it so easy. And, I had this debate on X in the week about how he needs... fans were saying he needs someone alongside him, basically, like Amrabat. We had that on Saturday and he was still bad. And he shouldn't need it, a player alongside him. The very best teams will often play with just one holding midfield and not two. United fans were unhappy that they were using two with McFred. And okay, it was the quality as much as anything there. But most, Liverpool are playing Alexis McAllister as a lone holding midfielder, who's not even really a holding midfielder. City play Rodri on his own normally when he's fit and available. Arsenal are playing Declan Rice on his own and moving a fullback in there. So Casemiro should be able to do that for Manchester United, but he can't this season. And he just looks, he looks sluggish.
He's almost one step behind what's going to happen at the moment, and a good player should be one step ahead.
Yeah.
And you're watching him; he's so lacklustre. He looks like he's lost even more pace. We've talked about his age. He's only 31 though, Tyrone. I know it's getting on, but in the grand scheme of things, players these days, the longevity of their careers, 31's not that old.
It's not that old. He's quite bulky, and there was a comment last year to a Brazilian journalist who does a lot of games at Old Trafford, and he I can't remember the exact quote, but it was something about like, oh, everyone in Brazil knows that I like my food or like to eat.
Loves a barbecue.
Fair enough. Like, we
all do. Yeah.
Love a Brazilian barbecue at the moment. But if I don't know if that's just a joke or if he is overdoing it at times in the summer. But if you are, then maybe at 31 it does catch up with you. And I was saying on Saturday that at the moment, if this continues, United be on the phone to Saudi Arabia in the summer trying to get someone to, because they're committed to it for 5 years, and we're 1 year and 2-3 months into that contract. So.
The problem is there's a lack of number sixes out there. I mean, every team's kind of after one at the moment. You look at the market. Declan Rice just went to Arsenal. Real Madrid have already got a few fantastic ones. They're not going to sell them. Like
Calvin Phillips.
Could you imagine? But that's another problem for the summer, isn't it?
It is, yeah. And I mean, maybe he'll come good. There's still time to turn it around. And like I say, he's not the only player in that team who's out of form, but he is a major problem, and it's going to be interesting to see how Ten Hag shapes this midfield, because it's the one area he has got a lot of options, and McTominay's put his name back in the frame. I don't think he'd be starting at the moment, but we know Ten Hag loves Kobe Mainoo, got Mount, Fernandes, Eriksen, Amrabat now. There's a lot of options there in midfield, and Casemiro's got to be under pressure, because like you said, I just don't think he's been good enough. I thought he was really poor in Munich against Bayern. And I mean, Musiala gave him the runaround there, I thought, and then he scored twice at the end. And you're kind of rephrasing it and re-looking at his performance. But he's not in the team to score goals. He's in the team to stop them being conceded, and he's not doing it enough at the moment, or well enough for me. And that description of being half a second or a second behind and just a little bit slow to everything, I think is fitting him. The goal that Galatasaray scored from the throw in midweek, when that throw comes in, he's next to the number 7. And then when the ball goes in the back of the net, the number 7, 6 or 7 yards away from him, and he's just, he's not quick enough there. And even the tackle to get sent off, it's Onana's fault. Like, clearly it was a poor pass out, but that tackle was never on. You're never going to win the ball there. It was just,
especially a player of his experience, you should understand what's going to happen.
What's going to happen? There's still a chance Onana makes the save.
Yeah. And if he doesn't, it's not your fault.
It doesn't. It's not your fault, and it's better to have 11 on the pitch. You must have known that the only thing that was going to happen there was a penalty and a red card. And yeah, he has. He is a major concern this season, I think, and United need him to improve pretty quickly.
There's definitely a lot of concerns at the moment.
There's a lot of concerns.
We'll continue that in part 2, but that's it for part 1. Welcome back to part 2 of the Manchester is Red podcast. Now, Ty, we kind of touched on Andre Onana there and his, should we say, a weak hand for the first goal. Kind of went under his body, didn't it? He got a hand to it, but it still went in. The replays confirmed what it looked like. It was really poor. He had a poor game against Bayern Munich where he made that howler. Galatasaray was his worst performance today. That pass for the penalty, as we've just discussed with Casemiro, and then he went down far too easy for the match-winning goal for Cardi. And he comes out and he needs to respond before the international break. He needs to go out on a high, doesn't he? And he makes this mistake.
Yeah.
What have you made of Onana's first few months? Well, first few months? Is it first 2 months at the club, really?
Basically, yeah. I thought he started pretty well, and watching him in pre-season, you could see the change from De Gea. You could see the change early on from De Gea. But there have been those errors. I mean, you look back now to the opening day of the season when he probably should have conceded the penalty against Wolves, and the decision making's been a little bit off. And recently, I mean, it's kind of all going to pot at the moment. I thought his distribution on Saturday was really weird, to be honest. They took short goal kicks to him, and then he just leathered it.
Is that not saying a lack of confidence? I feel it's carrying around the mistakes.
Yeah,
I think
possibly so. Yeah. I mean, it's it felt fitting that it was Brentford away a year ago that convinced Ten Hag that De Gea, we can't play out from the back with De Gea. We've just got to go long. And then the Liverpool game the week after, De Gea just launched every goal kick, and here you were kind of like, I mean, De Gea could have done what Onana did on Saturday.
And he would have saved that shot.
And he would probably have saved that shot, yeah. And, there's some slight mitigation in that shot came through a couple of bodies, but it wasn't particularly powerful. It was in the middle of the goal. he got a strong enough hand to it. His hand almost just went over the top of the ball.
You would have saved that.
I would have saved
You would have saved
sure,
that.
mate.
For anyone that doesn't know, Tyrone plays as a goalkeeper.
I'd have caught it and started But yeah, and like I say, it was after that, it was his distribution that kind of concerned me. I mean, it should be remembered that he actually made 2 pretty decent saves at 1-0 in like the 87th minute, maybe something like that.
Tipped over the bar.
Tipped over the bar from Mopai, and then the header, I think, from Norgard. But I mean, saves you'd probably expect a keeper to make, but he did them. He saved them very competently, and they turned out to be big saves. So that shouldn't be forgotten. But like I say, I thought his distribution was just odd because Brentford were kind of pressing and cutting off passing angles and things like that. But that's why you have a keeper who's so good with his feet that you can beat that press and find a pass when the angles aren't on to get the team building up. But all that was happening was he was launching it, and often it was going to Fernandes against Nathan Collins, and it was just coming back. It wasn't sticking. So it wasn't really the moment post-match to end up getting into it with Ten Hag, because obviously the narrative was very different. But it would be interesting to know what Ten Hag thought of that distribution and whether that was a deliberate plan to maybe go long and look to win second balls and things like that. But I don't think that is what Onana has been signed for. I think he's been signed to play passes into midfield and the fullbacks and get United playing out rather than just launching it upfield.
I was just double checking how many goals he's conceded this season. 19.
19.
Which has been terrible. But obviously a caveat on top of that, which we'll come on to, is the defence. We've had major injuries. Sancho Martinez is out. Rafa Varane, a minor injury it was described as. He's out again, Tyrone, which for all, Varane's a fantastic player, and we see his quality time and time again. It just happens far too often that he's out with an injury, doesn't it? And that's probably going to be something to address in the summer as well. They're probably going to need a centre half. In terms of who played, obviously in defence on Saturday, Johnny Evans, Harry Maguire at centre back, and we had Victor Lindelof at left back. I mean, when we saw the lineup, we thought Lindelof was going to be on the opposite side, at right back. What did you think of that? Because that was a bit of a bizarre tactic, I thought. I thought Lindelof would have played on that side. And he had a bit of a poor game, didn't he? But I did feel a bit sorry for him because he was out of position. And I think he might have been carrying an injury because he went straight down the tunnel.
He did go straight down the tunnel.
Substituted.
Yeah. I mean, he plays for Man United, so it makes sense if he was carrying an injury at the moment.
If you're a defender, you've got to get an injury if you play for Man United.
Probably felt left out. He had a tough time of things, but I can't imagine he's played left back that often before. He's definitely played right back on occasion, but left back's a very different role.
Why do you think he did that then?
I'm guessing he didn't want to move Dalot and maybe thought...
Interesting choice, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think it came up with Dalot post-match and that Brentford played quite a narrow midfield, and I think he maybe felt the space was going to be wide for the fullbacks, and if you have Lindelof's not going to be an attacking right back, and if you have Dalot on the left, he's probably going to come in field, so I guess maybe you wanted Dalot to hold the width on the right and give them an outlet down the right-hand side. But yeah, Lindelof did have a tough time. I mean, Mads Rorslev early on had quite a bit of joy against him. Like I say, I don't know what he was doing with that clearance for the goal. He kind of just nudged it straight back into the danger area. I mean, the left back issue has been a problem in the last few games, clearly, and it's very unfortunate to have 3 left backs who are all injured at the moment. And Reguilón actually made a decent enough start to his United career. It did feel like the Amrabat experiment couldn't go on and had to end. So, I mean, I think we all probably guessed that Lindelof would come in, but then we all guessed he'd come in at right back.
Yeah.
Other than that, I mean, when we started to hear about 10 to 2, maybe 5 to 2, that Varane was out, and then when you're looking at that defence of Dalot,
you're expecting the worst, aren't you? Really?
Yeah. I mean, Lindelof on left back, and then
Brentford must be licking their lips in the dressing room as well.
You're
coming out against that team. No disrespect to the back four, but I mean, Samuel wrote in one of his blog posts, actually used the term, it's not befitting of Manchester United. I mean, it almost feels fair. That back four.
It does, yeah. I mean, like I said, you can't overlook the injuries. I mean, Johnny Evans is 5th choice centre-half. You're not going to get a better 5th choice centre-half because in 99% of seasons, the 5th choice centre-half will play 3 games maybe. You kind of saw it with Liverpool the other year when they were playing midfielders at centre-back. You see it with, to go on to City, you see with the Rodri discussion at the moment, the problem is when you've got a player that good, you can't have a backup that good. There's inevitably going to be a drop-off, and it's the same here. You can't have a 5th choice centre-half who costs 30, 40 million pound and is good enough to slot in every week for Man United. Otherwise, he'd be playing every week for someone else.
We discussed that in the summer. We said, who's going to come to the club to be that fifth choice? It's not a sell. It's not attractive.
It's not attractive, and especially at centre-back where you don't get rotation. At least if you're third choice centre-forward, there's games you're going to be rotated, and the attacking subs are made during games. You don't really change your centre-halves during games. And, you know, essentially, yeah, I think there's maybe an argument that you could upgrade one of Maguire or Lindelof and have a better third choice. But to be fair, I thought Maguire played pretty well on Saturday. I thought Johnny Evans played well again. You know, I didn't think the defence was disastrous, really.
I mean, there's been a lot of criticism in that Lindelof, I mean, you look back to spring in last year and he was getting a lot of praise. Yeah. He was excellent even when they had those injuries, and he stepped up and he delivered. I think in the semi-final against Brighton, actually, he was really good. He stood out that day. He's not been really the same player, has he, this season? Just like a lot of them, which we keep on saying, he's underperformed. I argued Maguire should have came into the defence against Galatasaray. Obviously, Lindelof started, but Maguire started here. And as you've just said, I thought he was quite decent. And I'd start him again after the international break. I'd have him alongside Varane for Sheffield United. Yeah,
I think I'd have him alongside Varane as well. I think he's in his opportunity after this. You know, a strange situation that Ten Hag's relying on Maguire, someone that was clearly pretty close to being pushed out the door at the week in the summer. But yeah, I think he's earned his opportunity. Like I say, I thought he did pretty well alongside Johnny Evans. I mean, maybe they're the solution, the Leicester partnership of 2018-19. But you know, I mean, Evans' fifth choice is pretty reliable. You look at the two games he started now, Burnley and this, and I think he's played.
Yeah, fair play to him. He's
both really. You wouldn't look at him and think he's a major problem at the moment. Like you say, Maguire defended pretty well, won that header for the goal. I don't really recall any major concerns. I think he started a bit shakily. There was a couple of passes, or a pass that went straight out of play, and then one header that went straight to a Brentford player. But after that, he settled into the game and did pretty well. And yeah, I think he's earned the start at the moment. But you know, going forward, it's probably something they need to look at. I mean, the Martinez thing has got to be a concern that he's re-aggravated this foot injury. I mean, United aren't really giving much away, or you know, just kind of saying it's one of those things that happen. But he did it against Arsenal and then played 85 minutes and 90 minutes in the next two games, having not played for Argentina. I mean, it's really, really strange that's concerning with the medical department for me that's been allowed to happen, because he clearly felt it against Arsenal, and now he's probably going to be out for 2 months, maybe more. And if there's a weakness there.
And realistically, when Maguire's starting with Varane is going to be out at some point again.
I mean, Varane has missed 35, we think it is, 37 games now, and has played 70 for United. He's missing 1 in 3 games. And it's not like he missed 8 months through a knee injury or a broken leg or something. It's 10 different injuries in 2 years and 2 months. I mean, it's staggering, really. And when you're only fit for 1 in 3 games, it's pretty clear you need a very good third choice centre half. And if Martinez becomes injury prone now, I mean, hopefully the operation will sort it out, but you know, with the boots players wear these days, you're going to get that. He's going to get that stood on a lot as a centre half.
Like aren't they? Really thin. Yeah.
Yeah. So that could be an issue as well. But yeah, Varane's fitness is clearly a problem as well.
Need him back and fit and firing down the Martinez, really, and back to his best.
He makes a huge difference in their ability to play out from the back and find passes.
Should we give Marcus Rashford an honorary mention then before we end this part, because he was underwhelming again? I thought by this point of the season, obviously started quite slow, but we said, look, he started up front. When he moves to the left, we expect better performances from him. It's still not happening. We've got to the October international break. He's still not firing. How does it fix? How does it get better? That's the key question. I think Ten Hag's scratching his head and thinking that himself, isn't he? Yeah,
it is. I don't know. I mean, he's the ultimate confidence streak player, isn't he? When he goes on a goal-scoring run, he can be unstoppable. When that stops for him and he loses confidence, he can be unplayable in the sense that you can't play him. And there's got to be a debate, I think, about his place in the team at the moment. Maybe he'll do well for England in the international break, and that might boost his confidence. But you know, his form's undoubtedly a concern. There was a couple of moments. I think he had their first shot on target in the first half, and that was good play. But there was a moment before that when there was a ball. I think it was a headed clearance coming to him on the left near the touchline, and he tried to control it. A very simple ball coming to him, and just completely missed it. And he missed it by so much that it was United's throw. The ball just basically bounced under his foot, and he was nowhere near it. And there was a few groans. There was a moment early on where he kind of pulled out of 50-50 and didn't get the ball, and there's a few groans from the crowd then. And
the crowd is slowly, I mean, they've sensed it in the last few weeks, haven't they? And they're starting to get a bit irritated by his decision making and what he's doing on the ball.
I think that's always bubbling under the surface, I think, with Rashford there. And like I say, when his confidence is low, you can kind of see that he's a player that fans might get. And when results are going against you, because you do occasionally have this, you see it with Martial as well, this look of like kind of laissez-faire and not caring or whatever, which is clearly not the case, but the shoulders can slump and the body language can be poor, and you see that with Rashford, and I think fans jump on that. I mean, there was a big cheer when his number went up to come off on Saturday, and I think that's probably more that it was Garnacho coming on than Rashford going off. You know, I don't think it was thank God he's going off. I think it was more people pleased to see Garnacho, but there's got to be a debate over his form. I think it's one goal all season, and the big worry for United was always going to be that once they signed Højlund instead of Kane, they needed Rashford to score 30 goals again just to match last season, really. And at the moment, it's looking like he might not get to 20. And Højlund has started pretty well, but you know, sources at United were saying it in the summer, and we've said it, that he's not going to be a consistent goal-a-game striker at the moment. He was brilliant on Tuesday and pretty ineffective on Saturday, and that's
understandable, isn't it? At the stage of his career,
it is. He's if you include international appearances, I think he's on like 106, 107 senior games. He's incredibly raw. Most of those for Copenhagen and Sturm Graz. So he is incredibly raw, and it's inevitable that it's going to happen. He's done well in 2 Champions League games, but the Brentford game and the Palace League game, he's been pretty ineffective, really, and that is inevitable. United did say at the start of the summer that there was probably times where he'd have to come out of the team and they'd play Rashford or Martial through the middle, but the problem they got now is that Rashford's underperforming to such an extent that there's kind of an issue of where do the goals come from. Scott McTominay seems to be the answer.
Get him up front. I'll get told off by the producer for this because I'll give a shout out to a rival podcast. But Rest is Football, Gary Lineker, Micah Richards, and Alan Shearer's quite good. I'll be listening to that. And they were talking, Shearer and Lineker obviously well positioned to talk about strikers, talking about goal droughts, and they said, look, it can just take a moment where you score and it completely changes the complexion of your mind, your mindset going into the games, your confidence. And I feel that's just what Rashford needs. A few moments, get it back together. I thought Arsenal tonight, I thought that was going to be the moment for him. I mean, great finish away at Arsenal. I know it was a defeat in the end, but he just hasn't kicked on from there, has he? Which is the big problem.
No, he hasn't. It is a big issue. And like I say, he does feel like the ultimate kind of form and confidence player. You think back to after the World Cup last year, we had a pretty good World Cup, and the 2 months or so after that, I mean, he was unstoppable. He was scoring every week, especially at home. And now you look at him and he looks a totally different player. And I think so much of that, and like I say, his body language looks different as well. He's gone from like shoulders up, chest out, I'm scoring every week, I'm the man, to looking
wanting the pitch to swallow him whole.
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes. Yeah, concerned at what's happening and what's going wrong. And there's no doubt his form. I think there's a lot of issues here that are a problem for United, but 2 of the biggest ones, I think, are Casemiro and Rashford. If they were playing as well as they were last season, I think this season would be going a lot better than it is.
Completely. We'll leave that there for part 2. We'll be back in a moment for part 3. Welcome back to part 3 of the Manchester is Red podcast. Now, Tyrone, I didn't think I'd be asking you at the start of the season about top 4 hopes in October. Just at the start of the second week of October. But I was looking at the odds this morning for top 4, got them sent to my email, and United are now 9-2 to get top 4. Chelsea, Aston Villa, Brighton, Newcastle are all a shorter price to get in the top 4. Obviously City are flying as we expected, Arsenal are looking good, Liverpool and Tottenham are obviously up there, and I mean, from the early evidence, we talked about this a few weeks ago, they're looking quite solid in that position. Yeah. And United are already facing an uphill battle to replicate last season, aren't they?
They are, yeah. And those top 4 teams at the moment, I think United are only 4 or 5 points maybe off Liverpool in 4th.
I mean, United are only 6 points off City, fusing them.
But those top 4, they look really good teams. I think they're all looking pretty good this season. I mean, you read those odds out there, when you throw in those and then you add in Newcastle, Brighton,
Aston Villa are in there as well.
Chelsea are all shorter.
I'm surprised Villa are shorter.
I am, yeah. I mean, that's basically suggesting United are going to finish 9th.
Yeah.
I mean, if they finish 9th, I think Ten Hag's in serious trouble. You'd surely think they're going to finish above
top 6,
above 9th. Yeah, top 6, top 7. I mean, the thing with Villa and Brighton is they've got European football on Thursday night, which is going to be tricky, and they've not got huge squads. I do think they're both very good teams, and I think at the moment, if United were playing either after the international break, I think they'd beaten Brighton. Have already beaten them at Old Trafford. I think if they were playing Villa after the international break, you'd make Villa the favourites wherever it was. But it's a long season. You'd certainly expect them to get back in the fight. There's a chance 5th will get Champions League, of course, this season. Not sure how that works out. I think they'd actually need Villa and Brighton and West Ham to do pretty well. I think 'cause it's based on coefficient. But yeah, I think what we're in first, second week of October. I think you're already saying it's unlikely. I think it's unlikely. Clearly, United will get top 4 next season. I think it's unlikely they get out of their Champions League group. So we just see it so often since the days of Fergie that they get back in the Champions League and then they fall away the next year. And this year they've got back in the Champions League to, by the looks of things, get out of it as quickly as they possibly
can. Is it not absolutely bonkers that we've gone in the space of 3 months? Well, I mean, if you take it from May, for example, earlier this year to October, right? In that short space of time, we've gone from such positivity, a fantastic first year for Ten Hag, and a few weeks, 2 months into the season, it's like, what's going on? What's happened? How's it come to this?
I don't know. I mean, it just seems
it's the $1 million question, isn't it?
What happens to United? Yeah. It is.
It almost feels like a broken club, and no matter who manages it, you're always going to have this boom bust cycle, and problems are just going to
absolutely. And a huge part of it is clearly the ownership. That is clearly the elephant in the room here. We've not mentioned it yet. That is a major part of it. It is not the only part of it, but it is a major part of it. And clearly, this would be a better football club if it had new owners and owners that cared more. Basically, that is undoubted. But it is kind of a boom and bust cycle with Europe, and it's got to change because I said this earlier in the summer when you're in the Champions League for a year, then out of it. At the moment, it feels like United are almost invited guests to the Champions League, like you're inviting some old stager back into the Champions League, like, come back and roll back the years, play your greatest hits for a group stage. And then they're back in the Europa League the year after, and young players are going to look at that and think, if they want Champions League football, they're not reliable. I might be in the Europa League next year or the Conference League. And
inevitably, they'll Sevilla look likely to drop into Europa League as well. They're occupying the 3rd position in their Champions League group. So inevitably, they'll get United.
And it's summed up, when I was in Munich, I did a bit for, mentioned another rival there, BBC Radio Manchester, for the game, and it was the day that Solskjaer had done his interview, and I think he talked about trying to sign Bellingham and Haaland, and said it's damning on United. 15 years ago, young players of the quality of Bellingham and United would have needed Manchester United to make their careers. Now they look at it and they think, I don't need to. I don't need to.
Going to do the opposite. If sometimes
I need to stay away from there to make the career, if anything. And that's a problem. That shows how far United's stature has fallen, especially with players in that age bracket who can barely remember this club being so successful and so big. And they're a name. They're a huge name still. There's still going to be players out there who are desperate to play for Manchester United. I mean, I mentioned the noise for the goal on Saturday. Players want that. Players will want to play in front of 75,000, but what they don't want is that noise for a scratchy 2-1 home win against Brentford. They want that for beating Real Madrid or Barcelona in the Champions League semi-finals, and at the moment that looks a million miles off.
The Beckham documentaries reminded me a lot of those games, and if you've been watching it. McTominay referenced that actually in his interview. He said, look, I've been watching it, it's inspiring, so you'd hope a lot of them have been watching that.
It's
quite inspiring, actually, isn't it, to be fair?
It is, yeah.
If you look at the fixtures after the international break, Sheffield United away, they've been terrible, absolutely woeful. Copenhagen at home in the Champions League, Manchester City at home, and then Newcastle in the round of 16, the League Cup, of course. So, I mean, that's a season defining in a few weeks, isn't it? Because you've got important Premier League games, especially against your rivals, the Manchester derby. They need to win against Copenhagen. And in the League Cup, that offered some hope and a brilliant cup run in the trophy last year. And they need to go as far as they can in that competition again. It's crucial, really. They really perform and buck up their ideas when they return to action, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned that Sheffield United game. I mean, at the moment, that looks easy. If Paul Eckenbottom gets sacked this week, then it looks less easy, especially if Chris Wilder comes back and gets a hero's reception, and Bramall Lane will be absolutely rocking at 8 p.m. on a Saturday night. And suddenly you'd look at it and think, I'm not sure.
It's got the hallmarks of...
Not sure I fancy United fans.
Yeah.
So, you'd think there's probably going to be a change of manager there this week. It'd be a surprise if there's not. So it could look a lot trickier come kick-off time than it does at the moment. And yeah, the City game is obviously huge. It's always huge. The Copenhagen games, they have to win both. There's no other option for them now but to win both. And I mean, even if they win both of those and Bayern Munich win both of their games, United would only be 2 points ahead of Galatasaray going to Istanbul. And I think if you'd have offered Galatasaray that at the start of the group stage, they'd have taken it. And if Galatasaray beat them there, then they'd only need to beat Copenhagen away.
When you think of these players and how they perform in raucous atmospheres, we've saw it time and time again, that's just... you feel that fixture.
Yeah, there's no faith they'd win it.
Because the Turkish fans are crazy, the Galatasaray.
Yeah. So yeah, they, like I say, they need to use this as a turning point. It'd be interesting to see if they do. But as I said at the start, you can't just think, oh God, that was great. You can't kid yourself into thinking this is the turning point. You need to work to make it happen, and it is going to be a defining run. I mean, if they stumble against Sheffield United, then it just makes the City game absolutely monstrous, really. City haven't been great recently. They've fallen a bit.
You'd fancy them under Solskjaer, I guess, so.
You probably would fancy them under Solskjaer.
These kind of games in these circumstances, they'd often spring a shock.
Yeah, I mean, you'd fancy them more if Rodri could get himself suspended again.
Yeah, I think.
True. But yeah, it's going to be a huge game and a huge run. But when you start the season as badly as United have, every game and every run at the moment is massive to get back on track.
I was looking at how many games it took Jose Mourinho to get sacked in 2018.
24.
Sorry?
24?
24 games and 8 defeats.
I thought it was 7 defeats.
8 defeats. 100%. I double-checked it because Ten Hag was obviously on 6 now, and I thought he was going to go to 7. So
I did as well. And Solskjaer got sacked after losing 7 of 13.
There you go. And it just shows you, doesn't it? Like, if Ten Hag's lost 6 now in 11, I mean, that he was a whisker away from losing 7. So, I mean, we talked about it the other week. We said, look, he's got a lot of credit in the bank. And realistically, the club cannot continue this managerial merry-go-round, this boom-bust cycle as we've saw. So he is going to be given time, and rightly so. But there is pressure mounting on him, isn't it? Because at Manchester United, you need to get results. It's as simple as that. And they just aren't coming at the moment. No, they're not.
There was a moment in the second half when they passed it backwards from midfield and along the defence, and Ten Hag sunk to his knees basically in the technical area, and it looked a little bit desperate for someone who's normally quite calm and placid there. I've never seen him do that before. If it was Guardiola doing that, you'd just be like, that's better for you. But
very dramatic, isn't it?
Very dramatic, yeah. But Ten Hag doesn't really do that. And I looked at it, and I'd initially put it in my piece for the morning from the game, saying that there was a hint of desperation about his body language on the touchline, and even it would have been a disastrous couple of weeks for United and for us if they'd lost. I don't think there's any danger he'd have been under pressure, but there's certainly a degree of pressure building. It's eased a little bit after that result, but it could come back on very quickly. And like we said there, if they finish 8th this season or 9th or whatever it was that the bookies are predicting, then he's going to be in a whole world of trouble, I think. But yeah, at the moment, he's the best man for the job, I think, at the moment. Partly because this is his squad now, which is, you could say, is an argument for the reason why he's the best man for the job, and an argument for the reason why he's not, because it is his squad and he's making a bit of a mess of it.
You talk about the owners, that's another problem in itself. Like, say if Ten Hag goes, we discussed this every week again, that's his team, that's his squad.
Yeah. And
then the manager's going to come in and inherit those players. And that's been the cycle of the last few years. There's no cohesion, structure, aligned recruitment where the managers can pick up where the other one left off and have that kind of aligned philosophy and the players to suit it.
Well, that's it. The signings have all been clearly Ten Hag signings. John Murtough has signed players Ten Hag wants. That's undeniable. Look at the players that have come in from Holland.
Kees Vos wanted them.
Kees Vos, yeah.
He was at the game as well on Saturday, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was. I think he called it home on Instagram a few weeks ago. So I think he's there pretty regularly now. But yeah, you can't make all those signings and then change manager now, because the next manager coming in probably isn't going to want an Eredivisie All-Stars team. And
that's a good way to put it.
There's Amrabat's still a bit of an unknown quantity, but there's clearly doubts over Anthony's ability as a £85 million right winger. Martinez, I think, is clearly a good signing. And Arna, there's question marks at the moment. Malacia, probably question marks. You back up left back, I think he was solid enough last season, but
he looks like what he is, a player for the final.
Yeah. And even Amrabat, the
jury's still out, definitely.
The jury's still out, and I don't know if another manager coming in would look at that and think, I want him as me kind of backup number 6, because he's had an okay career, but nothing that he's done in his club career suggests he's good enough for Man United. And don't get me wrong, he was phenomenal in the World Cup, But Cleberson was phenomenal in the World Cup.
Ty, but he made that tackle on Mbappe. What are you on about?
It was a great tackle. He has
to be a world-class player if he made that tackle.
And like I say, maybe I'm doing a disservice. Maybe he'll turn out to be really reliable. But I'm just saying at 27, there's nothing on his club CV that makes you think he's good enough for United. And Ten Hag knows him brilliantly. Maybe Ten Hag will get the best out of him. But in a way, that's kind of the point. If you need to stick with Ten Hag, now you've backed him. And the other issue is the list of, I did something last week, and of the top 6 in the betting to replace him, I think 3 was sacked in their last job.
It's a handsy flick,
Conte, and I can't remember the other one was.
None of those names were inspiring.
Michael Carrick is 5th favourite. He's managing the Championship. Roberto De Zerbi got beat 6-1 last week. Graham Potter's the other one who was in there. Potter, Conte, Nagelsmann all sacked in their last job. Championship manager is 5th favourite.
Then again, you look at Arsenal and you kind of look how Arteta emerged, and it was not someone you'd expect to take him to this point that they're at.
No, it wasn't. And what Arteta had is time to reshape that squad entirely. I mean, that's the great thing that Arteta has done, that he got rid of so many high earners, ageing players at Arsenal that were not only not pulling their weight, but weren't contributing to the dynamic he wanted. And he's clearly a bit of a quirky oddball, it's fair to say. I think some of the stuff he comes out with and whatnot, and the stuff from the Arsenal All or Nothing, but he's got a young team that are all buying into what he does now, and they're proving to be successful. And maybe that's that kind of works for Ten Hag's favour. Maybe that's what Ten Hag needs. He needs time, because most managers will go through a spell where things aren't working. And look at Pep's first season at City, it was a bit of a shocker. The point where a lot of people were saying, "This told you so. It'd never work in the Premier League," and no one's saying that now. So
looks like United have got their version of Claudio Bravo, not their Edison.
Well,
I was thinking that the last few weeks.
Yeah,
God.
definitely. Yeah. I think there's definitely concerns on that front.
Last question then, Tyrone. Have you got TikTok?
No, I haven't.
Well, the producer has put this in. If you have got TikTok and you are listening to this podcast, we're close. No, sorry, we have hit 6,000 followers. So if you're a TikTok
I download it and make it 6,001.
I've not downloaded TikTok, believe it or not, contrary to what you might think.
My dancing's for private consumption only.
And we're nearly over 5,000 on YouTube as well. So head across to the YouTube channel and check her out on those platforms. But for now, thank you very much, Tyrone.
Thank you, Stephen.
And thanks, listeners. Have a great week. Take care.